Upon seeing the elderly man being attacked on the bridge, Elijah didn't hesitate to intervene. The next day, when a sleek limousine stopped in front of his small apartment, he had no idea what was about to happen. Elijah woke up before dawn. As usual, he threw on his running shoes, slipped into his frayed hoodie, and left the apartment quietly so as not to wake his mother or his younger sister, Alana. The early morning runs were his escape, his moment to breathe amidst the chaos. Bills piling up on the table, his mother's worsening diabetes, and the landlord's eviction threats loomed over him constantly. The air was crisp and sharp, the cold biting his skin, but he relished it. The bridge ahead was shrouded in the soft glow of distant streetlights, empty except for the faint roar of traffic from the nearby expressway. Elijah ran to the steady rhythm of his feet striking the pavement, his thoughts slowly clearing with each step. As he approached the far end of the bridge, something caught his eye. An old man stood there, surrounded by three men. Elijah slowed his pace, his eyes narrowing. The men's movements were aggressive, their voices loud even over the morning silence. One held a glinting metal bat that caught the dim light. Elijah's heart began to race, but not from exertion. "Come on, old man, give it up," one of the assailants sneered, a young man with a red hoodie, shoving the old man back. "Please, I don't have anything," the elderly man stammered, his hands trembling. Elijah's chest tightened. Memories of his late father, who had been killed in a robbery gone wrong, surged into his mind. A voice in his head screamed for him to turn back, to avoid danger. But something deeper urged him forward. Without fully realizing it, Elijah quickened his pace, adrenaline surging through him. "Hey!" Elijah shouted, his voice cutting through the cold morning air as he approached. The three men turned, their eyes narrowing at the sight of Elijah. Red hoodie, as Elijah had already started to call him in his mind, raised the bat menacingly. "Who the hell is this?" muttered one of the other attackers, a lanky teen with a scar over his left eyebrow. Elijah kept his hands visible and his tone steady. "Let the man go. He's not worth it." Red Hoodie's lips curled into a smirk as he sauntered forward. "You got a death wish or something?" he jeered, swinging the bat lazily. Elijah's eyes flicked to the old man, who was visibly shaking. "Go," Elijah said firmly to the man. "Now." The elderly man hesitated, his frightened gaze darting between Elijah and the attackers. "Go," Elijah repeated, louder this time. Finally, the man shuffled away, unsteady but moving. Elijah exhaled a breath of relief. But the moment was short-lived. The lanky teen lunged first, aiming a wild swing at Elijah. Elijah sidestepped and shoved him backward, but Red Hoodie was already closing in. The bat swung toward him, and Elijah barely managed to raise his arm to block it. Pain exploded in his shoulder as the force of the blow drove him to his knees. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Red Hoodie snarled, raising the bat again. The third attacker, silent until now, kicked Elijah's phone from his hand as he tried to call for help. It skittered across the pavement, coming to a stop far out of reach. Elijah's mind raced. He was outnumbered and outarmed. He needed to buy time. Just as Red Hoodie brought the bat down again, distant sirens wailed through the air. The attackers froze, exchanging nervous glances. Scar wheezed, clutching his stomach where Elijah had landed a solid punch earlier. "Let's get out of here," the third guy muttered, his eyes darting toward the road. Red Hoodie glared at Elijah, spitting on the ground. "You're lucky, hero. Next time, you're dead." The three ran, their footsteps fading into the distance. Elijah collapsed onto the cold pavement, pain radiating through his battered shoulder. He crawled toward his phone, his trembling fingers managing to dial 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" a calm voice asked. "There's been an assault on the bridge." Elijah panted. "Three guys. They ran off when they heard the sirens. I'm hurt, but I'll be okay." The operator's voice remained steady. "Help is on the way. Stay where you are." "Sir." Elijah hung up and leaned against the railing, his breath shallow and ragged. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the river below. Despite the pain, a faint sense of relief washed over him. The old man was safe. It was worth it. The sound of approaching footsteps jolted him from his thoughts. A paramedic team arrived quickly, their bright uniforms standing out against the gray morning. They helped Elijah onto a stretcher, tending to his injuries with swift precision. The pain in his shoulder was agonizing, but he tried to focus on the thought that the old man had escaped unharmed. "Are you sure you're okay to go home after this?" one of the paramedics asked as they finished wrapping his shoulder. "Yeah," Elijah replied through gritted teeth. "I just need some rest." The ambulance ride back to the neighborhood was quiet, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving Elijah with a dull ache in his body. He declined a hospital visit, insisting he could recover on his own. As he stepped out onto the cracked pavement near his building, the city's noises surrounded him like an unwelcome reminder of how fragile everything felt. He made his way back to the apartment, each step sending jolts of pain through his shoulder. His mother, Lila, greeted him at the door with a mixture of relief and worry in her eyes. "Elijah, what happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm fine, Mom," Elijah said, offering a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just had a rough morning." But as he sat down to explain what had happened, leaving out the more dangerous details, his mind raced with questions. Who was the old man? Why had those guys targeted him? And why, of all things, did it feel like this wasn't the end of the story? The following day, Elijah tried to return to his normal routine. His arm was in a sling, and every movement was a reminder of the previous day's events. Still, he managed to help his sister get ready for school and reassure his mother that everything was under control. The knock on the door came just as he was settling down with a cup of coffee. It wasn't the usual hurried rap of the landlord or the cautious knock of a neighbor. It was steady, deliberate. Elijah opened the door to find a man in a tailored suit standing there. Behind him, a sleek black limousine idled at the curb. "Elijah Carter?" the man asked, his voice calm and formal. "That's me," Elijah replied warily. "Who's asking?" "My employer wishes to speak with you," the man said, gesturing to the limousine. "It's about yesterday's incident on the bridge." Elijah hesitated, his mind racing. Was this about the old man? He glanced back into the apartment, where his mother and sister were busy in the kitchen. He couldn't bring trouble to their doorstep. "Give me a minute," he said, stepping outside and closing the door behind him. The suited man opened the car door, and Elijah climbed in. The interior was pristine, the leather seats more comfortable than anything Elijah had ever owned. Seated across from him was the elderly man from the bridge, looking surprisingly composed despite the previous day's ordeal. "Thank you for coming," the man said, his voice warm but firm. "My name is Gregory Loron." "Elijah," he replied, still on edge. "What's this about?" Loron leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I owe you my life, and I don't take such debts lightly. Those men were after something valuable, something that belongs to me. You stepped in when no one else would, and for that, I'm grateful." Elijah shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. "I just did what anyone would have done." Loron smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but not everyone would have the courage. I'd like to repay you, Elijah, in more ways than one." "What do you mean?" Elijah asked, his suspicion growing. Lawrence's expression turned serious. "Those men you faced, they won't stop easily. They think they're untouchable. But I have the resources to ensure they don't harm you or your family again." Elijah frowned. "And what's in it for you?" "Let's just say I believe in rewarding bravery," Loron said. "I want to help you, Elijah, not just with this, but with your future." Elijah's heart raced as he considered the offer. It was too much, too sudden. But as he thought about the mounting bills, the eviction threats, and the fear in his sister's eyes, he realized he might not have a choice. "What do you have in mind?" he asked, his voice steady. Lauren's smile returned. "We'll start with ensuring your family's safety. And from there, we'll see where your courage takes you."